What food has made you wonder, how did our ancestors discover that this was edible? Not exactly relevant as it's not something you eat, but I always thought this about tobacco and marijuana, like who was the first person to decide to dry out these plants and smoke them, and why these plants? Did they just go around drying out everything and smoking it? I like to imagine that the day they happened to dry out and smoke plant number 2098, which happened to be MJ, and they got way more than they bargained for. One time I saw a girl I worked with smoking something and was surprised because she didn't smoke weed. I asked what it was and she said, I don't know. I found these plants hiking and they smelled good. So I guess the answer to your question is hippie chicks. Olives. Not for oil but for eating. You can't just pick and eat them. Somehow someone figured out if you cured them for weeks they transform into something edible. I was watching a documentary about a native Brazilian tribe that prepares coim. The process involves cooking this very starchy root, chewing it and letting it ferment to produce an alcoholic beverage. The process of chewing is necessary as the enzymes from our saliva create the sugars necessary for fermentation. As this old woman is chewing the root, she says, I wonder how our ancestors figured this out. Puffer fish. It takes 3 years or more for a chef to be qualified to prepare and serve the dang fish without poisoning the consumer. We are not that scarce in other fish choices, guys. Why did we not just give up? Ackee. Poisonous, but if eaten correctly, it's really good. It's really good with salt fish and dumplings. Wild almonds are poisonous. There is a mutation that blocks their cyanide production significantly. One of the earliest domesticated plants. Some genius in early civilization figured out how to either cultivate the mutants or graft them. Corn has a similar story. It was bred from a plant called teosinte. Teosinte has a hard layer that can't be bitten through and only a few kernels. Nobody is sure why the Mesoamericans bred it to be edible, or even how. Durian fruit. Cacao. You have to do a whole lot to turn it into chocolate. It's true it takes a lot to make it chocolate, but they were eating it in a lot of other ways first. And originally chocolate was closer to what we consider to be dark chocolate, only way more intense. Mushrooms. There are tens of thousands of types of mushrooms, and plenty that'll kill ya. But like 20 of them are good to eat. So, trial and error. There are even some magic ones. I read a story once about how a Native American tribe tried a potential new food. The test subject was normally a young male. Say it was a new seed. They would first soak, then boil and drain several times, then roast. Test subject would try it. If there were no adverse side effects, they would repeat above but remove one of the steps, and did so until the food was tried raw. Not sure how true this was, but it kinda makes sense. We have a tree seed in NZ. Eaten raw it cause fit and then paralyses. The person needs 3-4 steps to make it eatable, yet was planted in groves and eaten by the Maori. Meringue, especially before electric whisks. What sort of weirdo decided I'm taking the yolks out of these eggs? Then I'll whisk the whites by themselves for about 2 eternities. Then I'll whisk in some sugar but only a tiny bit at a time. Then I'll bake it but with hardly any heat, and see what happens. Someone who spent just as much time churning milk so long it turned to butter. Chilies. Imagine finding something that is physically painful to eat and deciding to add it to everything. Taro root and leaves. If you don't cook it, your mouth and throat will feel like they are getting cooked because calcium oxalate forms tiny razor-sharp crystals in the plant. And if you eat enough you can die. People still get poisoned from eating that because it's just sitting there on supermarket shelves in the fruit and veggies section. Yay. One of few poisonous, raw plants that are commonly available. I bet popcorn was a fun surprise. Cheese. Milk. Sure. But once it goes sour, it's disgusting. Then it gets lumpy and stinks. At some point after that stage, someone thought, I'm going to eat those lumps. You're underestimating the scarcity of food and long periods of famines that our species endured till we got to a point where we could erase all trauma from our psyche by deluging ourselves with 55 different flavors of breakfast cereals. Castoreum. Someone decided at one point to sample a beaver anal gland sac. Cashews. The outer shell of a cashew is so toxic it can literally burn your hand without proper handling techniques, which can also explain why they're so expensive. Every time I eat crab I always imagine how desperate the first person who ate it must have been. It's delicious, but man, the work you have to put in for what you get out is a battle. Must have been out of spite. Pinch me, you little frick. See what happens. This underground nut that is used in nonna cooking. It's poisonous, but you can eat it after it has been stored underground covered in ash for God knows how long. Buakalak I think it's called. That's nonna business. Manisoba, pronounced Manisoba, is an Brazilian dish discovered by the natives in the Amazon. It has to be cooked for 1 week before it stops being poisonous. Hey Jerry, we cooked this grounded leaf for 3 days and Dave still died. Should we give up now? Just boil that crap for 4 more days and we'll try again. Coffee. Apparently, shepherds noticed that every time goats ate a certain plant they became restless and energetic. Cinnamon. It's not like most other herbs and spices where it's just a random growing thing that you toss into the pot and off you go. Cinnamon is the inner bark from a tree, which is then ground up into your food. What the heck? Any plant matter that smells nice is kind of fair game. Bread. How did they stumble upon mixing yeast and flour and letting it sit and then think this got bigger? Let's cook it and eat it. There's evidence that grains were already eaten before farming existed, likely as a hardened pap by crushing, mixing with water and letting it dry, maybe as travel rations. It's not a huge leap from crushed grains mixed with water to yeast and baking. Oysters. How hungry was that guy? This looks like a bowl of snot. There's no way anyone could find this appetizing. Maybe if I add spicy ketchup. Lobsters. Who the heck first looked at a water cockroach with murder fists and said yummy? A poor person. Cactus. The plant is intimidating and can be painful, but someone found out how great they can be because nopales are very popular in Hispanic cuisine. Simple. Someone got poked by a cactus and in a fit of rage chopped it down. Realized the inside was surprisingly nice and juicy considering everything in a 2-day trip was dry as heck. That Swedish rotten fish. Easy. Just salt the fish and store it normally. Then one day a batch is bad and you have to eat it because famine or something. And apparently it's okay and you can store it longer or, again, something. Or, we can ferment grain to beer. What happens if we ferment fish? Snails. I mean, come on. They taste like garden. The only way I can describe it was if you were to go into your yard with a spoon, dig up some grass and soil and eat it. We all know that ancient Hawaiians loved pig, but the way in which they cooked it kind of boggles my mind. They didn't roast it over fire, or cure it and cut it. No, they dug a hole, placed wet leaves inside, put the pig on the leaves, put more wet leaves on top, covered it with burning hot rocks, and let it cook for hours, like an all-natural slow cooker, and it's good enough to make you want to cry. Artichokes. Mostly because as a kid my mom's friend told me that the first person to try one was named Artie and he choked. Since then I've been curious about how our ancestors actually realized that the artichoke was good if you only ate part of the leaves and took out tons of thin hairs that are uncomfortable to eat. The first time I had artichokes was at a party and no one told me you aren't supposed to eat the whole leaf. I just kept chewing and chewing. I read once that a gland in a beaver's butthole tastes like strawberries and was a source for the artificial flavor for a time. I cannot imagine the joy of whoever was given the lower end of a beaver for dinner and ended up with a strawberry explosion. Beaver's anal gland excretion, castoreum, is still used to this day for artificial vanilla flavoring. It is also occasionally used for strawberry and raspberry, but it's less common. Chinese century eggs. In the same vein, any kind of fermented stuff, like who would have thought, hey, let's bury this for a worryingly long period of time. It'll taste freaking delicious. Coconuts. They're hard as heck to break open from a raw, fresh off the tree state. How the heck did someone look at that rock that fell from a tree and think I bet this is edible? Also mushrooms. Doesn't matter what kind. How many people died just so we could find out a couple species of mushrooms are deadly? Nah man, coconuts aren't that hard to open. I've done it bashing them on a rock on the beach. The inside looks and smells delicious, and the young ones give safe water while the older ones have firm flesh you can use for a ton of things. I think people were on that crap pretty fast. potatoes. I mean, who dug up a dirty odd-shaped hard thing and thought, this will be nice if I boil it, or put it in the fire to bake? Well, he was actually torn between boiling it, mashing it and sticking it in a stew, you see. Durian. At some point, someone decided that eating something that smells like Satan died from dysentery while sitting in a trash pile during summer was a good idea. I've eaten durian several times and actually like it, but you aren't wrong. Many people actually say that there is a good versus bad durian that you can detect via smell, but they all smell like warm trash to me. Kopi Luwak. Who in their right mind looked at cat crap and thought, oh, I wonder what those beans would taste like brewed? Honey. Some dude finds a hive full of angry pain bugs and says, you know what? I bet those bastards are hiding something delicious in there. Just by seeing the amount of animals that eat honey. Blue cheese. Crawfish. I got food poisoning after eating some last week and I immediately thought, who decided that eating these meatless mud bugs was a good idea? Just about every Cajun food was created by really poor swamp folks trying to not die of hunger. The reason everything is spicy is to keep from having to taste the weird meat they found to cook and eat. Tea. Someone boiled leaves in water to the extent that it stained the water brown, and then thought it would be good to drink. Chinese legend says that some guy was boiling water outside and leaves blew into the boiling water and he decided to try it and went, hey, this is pretty good. Tacos. Where did they even find them? Taco trees, obviously. Tomatoes were once assumed to be poisonous for no other reason than normally anything bright and shiny in nature will probably kill you, that is, poison dart frogs, etc. I have no idea how, but some guy figured out that they're not only not deadly, they're delicious. So what does he do? He holds a public demonstration where he eats an entire barrel of tomatoes. Everyone was like, welp, he's dead. And now we have ketchup. Alcoholic beverages. Like, imagine the first person to find out that fermenting berries could lead to something that is not only drinkable, but also makes you feel really good. They probably watched animals eating fermented fruits on the forest floor and decided to copy them. Almonds. Wild almonds contain cyanide. Some crazy dude decided to keep growing them until they became safe to eat. That takes dedication and a bit of madness. Popcorn. Durian. It's spiky AF and stinks to the moon and back. Who thought it's a good idea to even touch it and then to put it in their mouth after smelling it? This is Diamond SpongeBob. He only appears every 200,000 videos. Subscribe for good luck. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.